So there is a tendency, and I've been traveling in the Netherlands in the last 6 months a lot, and I must say that I was shocked by the extent to which people who would never vote for any populist politician would still have a deep sense of loss and fear about the presence of Muslims in Europe, and in the Netherlands specifically. So there is a lot to be done there to remain truthful to the idea of religious freedom, to stand up and challenge everybody who would contradict basic freedoms of our Muslim populations. So that's where it begins. You cannot confront others with the idea of freedom of religion if a society doesn't live up to that ideal itself. And it is an ideal because it's definitely not realized in every aspect in this society. It is a struggle. There is a tendency to become untruthful to that ideal. But then the question is asked to the Muslim communities, to what extent is the practice of your religion transformed by the same horizon of religious freedom? I don't talk about the fundamental text, I talk about here religious practice. To what extent is it influenced by this condition of religious freedom? So questions are unavoidable, in my view, to the Muslim community, to the extent that what does it mean for a Muslim to practice your religion here in relation to other religions? What does it mean as a believer to live in a society where a considerable part of the population are non-believers? What does it mean to be confronted as a practicing Muslim with the plurality in your own community? And I was very pleased with some of the comments of Terry Brown on one of his books about the Muslim presence in Europe, by criticizing the Muslim communities for their lack of tolerance and for the absence of a culture of dialogue. Because I know very well, if I look at Turkish Muslims, for example, that the relation between Alevite Muslims and Sunnites is not very welcome, to say the least. So, how does one relate to the plurality in one's own community? And fourthly, the question is, what about apostasy? So I think those questions are unavoidable. You cannot possibly ask and claim a right without accepting some of the obligations that go hand in hand with those rights. And that is true for everybody, for Muslims and non-Muslims. And if we don't share that horizon of religious freedom and remain truthful to that ideal, then it will be very difficult to transcend the present conflict and the present anxiety. And I miss politicians who basically argue in a very simple but convincing way, confront part of the autochtone opinion, part of the Muslim opinion, and say we have to build a new idea of this society based on an old ideal of religious freedom. So my conclusion would be, also reacting to Nilüfer Göre, I see the emergence of a public sphere in Europe. I see a convergence, because all the models of integration are somehow failing. And we have too much a tendency to comment upon our society and say, you know, the riots in France, and then we say, well, it's a failure of the French model. And in France, after the murder of Theo van Gogh, everybody could explain that it vindicated the French model and was the failure of the Dutch model. And then in Britain, when things go wrong, in Germany, everybody knows it's a failure of the British model. I would simply say there are no models. There are shared lived realities in our main cities that are very comparable, and there are no functioning models to the extent that something new is at hand. A new reality is emerging. Beyond immigration, there's a new challenge to citizenship, and I would like to talk about that and see how we can go beyond those models and the sterile discussion about republicanism, about multiculturalism. I've had it a little bit because I've been 8 years now, and I've seen all these arguments, and I think it's far more important to have a different approach and look at the lived realities of our main cities. My ideal would be, as a conclusion, that I would think that ethnicity will erode over time and that religion will remain. So the idea of an open society, in my view, is a society where we will be able, with the three monotheistic religions, to be able to live together, not separated, but together, to share some normative ideals like the freedom of religion. And I think religion is a persistent element in our society. So what Habermas called the dialectics of secularization, I think we will see that the old, very simple idea of secularization will prove to be not a correct idea about the future of our societies. So religion is there to stay, and exactly the freedom of religion is not only about defending the state against false claims of religion, but even more so to defend religion against the claims and the pressure of the state. So religion is a persistent element. Ethnicity, I think when we look from generation to generation, we will see that ethnicity will erode. For the children, and then for the grandchildren, and those after them, the idea that once my father, grandfather, or even further down the line in history, once migrated, of course, can have a sentimental, can have every sense of identification. But still, I think it wouldn't explain one's life as it is lived here. So if I come across a boy who was born in a family of Moroccan migrants and says proudly, "I'm a Moroccan," the worst thing I could do is to take that line and think he's describing that his life is basically the same as his life would have been if his parents would have stayed in Morocco. Of course, his life is very different here. And so I don't take the line, "I'm a Moroccan," as a sign of persistent ethnicity from one generation to the other. I take it perhaps as a rejection of this society, as a criticism of this society. I want to learn something from that line, but I cannot take it possibly as describing I live the life of a Moroccan here. So, looking at Obama, who is misused by almost everybody, so I will take my pick of him as well. No, I think what is promising in him is exactly that he wants to go beyond the claims of ethnicity, that his future, his idea is that we're not going to describe our societies continuously as multi-ethnic or multi-racial, because the promise was always, with his idea of multi-ethnicity and the emphasis put on it, was always that it would remain something of minorities. And populism is the ethnicity of the majority. That is the problem. Populism is rampant throughout Europe. Why? Because perhaps we put too much emphasis on where we come from and not where we go to. So my idea is that we stop talking too much about the divided origin and start talking about a shared future. Thank you very much.